Chapter 20 is on the lymphatic system and lymphoid organs and tissues. So in this chapter, we're going to cover two entities that are separate, but they're related to each other. We're going to start with the lymphatic system, and the job of this system is to take fluids, our tissue fluids. Remember, fluid in our tissues comes from the blood, comes from the capillaries. So it takes these fluids and returns it to the blood, where it started from. So it's a system of vessels, but in these vessels are not blood. We have lymphatic vessels which contain lymph, the tissue fluid that's in the vessels. Along these vessels, we have lymph nodes, which are like little filters to cleanse the lymph as it passes through the vessels and back to the blood. And in the second part of this chapter, we'll look at the lymphoid organs and tissues. These include the spleen, thymus, tonsils, lymph nodes, and other lymphoid tissues. And as you can see here, it's the basis of our immune system. So we're beginning with the lymphatic system. And as we said, it's a system that takes tissue fluid, also called interstitial fluid, and brings it back to the blood. There's lymphatic vessels throughout your body that do not carry blood, they carry lymph, and we can use the word lymph when the fluid surrounding the tissues, called interstitial fluid, as soon as it enters these lymphatic vessels, at that point it's considered lymph. So last chapter we looked at blood vessels, and we see blood vessels here. Here's a capillary bed. We know that fluid can flow out of the blood into the tissues. That's where exchange of material takes place around these capillary beds throughout our body. Well, the lymphatic system will pick up this fluid, this interstitial fluid, and let's follow the path here with these arrows through these tiny lymphatic capillaries, which we see larger down in this picture. And these capillaries will join other capillaries to form larger and larger lymphatic vessels. We call them eventually trunks and ducts when they get very large, and you can see that fluid gets put back into the blood where it started from. Along the way, we have these little nodules called lymph nodes to filter this tissue and to fight infection before that lymph is put back into the blood. And we also see it has a starting point and an ending point. So the lymphatic system is a one-way system. Contrast that with our cardiovascular system, which is a circuit. So when we're talking about blood vessels and capillaries, there's really no end and no beginning because it's one large circuit. However, when we're dealing with capillaries, they just begin. Blind-ended, we call it. If I go back to this picture, you can see these lymphatic capillaries just have beginning points all throughout our tissues. All of our tissues except we can see a few areas in the body where we don't have lymphatic capillaries. They're more permeable than blood capillaries, meaning more fluid can enter lymph capillaries or lymphatic capillaries than blood capillaries. So it can take up larger particles, which is important to fight infection because debris, pathogens like bacteria can enter the lymphatic system, cancer cells, for example, as well. So here is what makes the lymphatic capillaries more permeable than blood capillaries. Here's a blind end. One feature that lymphatic capillaries have is that they have these endothelial cells that make up the capillary, but they overlap, forming this one-way mini valve. So these little valves allow fluid to rush in, but that wouldn't happen unless it has the second feature, which are these connective tissue areas. These are collagen filaments that anchor the capillary to the tissue. So when the fluid pressure rises in the tissue or interstitial space surrounding the capillary, that forces the blood through these little mini valves. Now, if the pressure decreases below that of the capillary, well, then fluid would want to rush out, but it can't because the valves would be forced shut. Right, so this specialized structure allows fluid to be forced in, but is not allowed to escape. And there's one type of lymphatic capillary that's different from the rest of them. It's a special case. They're called lacteals. And you can see they're specialized lymphatic capillaries only in the mucous membranes of your intestine. And their job is to absorb the digested fat and deliver it back to the blood. So fat does not get absorbed directly into the blood through your digestive tract. It actually goes through the lymphatic system, specifically the lacteals. And that material we do not call lymph, like we do in other lymphatic vessels. We actually call this fatty substance being delivered in the lacteals chyle, which gets delivered to the blood.